The headlines say kids with mild autism are being cut from the NDIS. But is that the reality? Here's what's actually changed and what it means for autistic Aussies. Welcome, my stars of Orion. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Orion Kelly, that autistic guy. I'm all about providing validation and support for autistic people and their loved ones. Let's start at the start. What has actually changed? Okay, so the Australian government has announced Thriving Kids. Now, it's a $2 billion plan to build support outside of the NDIS for children with mild to moderate developmental concerns or autism. It starts July 1, 2026, with a full rollout by mid-2027, with states co-funding. Now, once it's operating, children's NDIS access settings will change so more support sit in mainstream and community services, or at least that's what the government would have you think. So where does this all fit? Okay, so this sits within foundational supports, broader foundational supports reform, which is government-funded supports outside of the NDIS and alongside the National Autism Strategy. So what decides the access to the NDIS under this reform? Well, it's needs-based. Diagnosis doesn't grant access by itself. Function does. You've got autism, level 2 or 3 on List A, which often meets requirements, and level 1 can qualify with strong evidence of substantial functional impact. And also part of the decision-making process is 6 domains to consider: communication, social interaction, learning, self-care, self-management, and mobility. Now, I've got plenty to say on this, and I'm just about ready to do it. My jumper matches my mood. But first, what will the government say? Okay, here's what you're going to hear. Kids are being cut today. Absolutely not. That's false. This is a staged reform. Foundational supports equal no support. Absolutely not. They're government-funded supports built outside of the NDIS. Level 1 autistic people can't get NDIS anymore. False. Function-based access still applies. Whatever. Let's talk about the NDIS. Why does it exist? Okay, so before the National Disability Insurance Scheme, supports were a postcard lottery. So state systems were underfunded, unfair, fragmented, inefficient. Families had little choice. No certainty they'd get the help they needed. So the Productivity Commission said the cost of lifetime disability can be so big that we need to pool the risk, an insurance approach instead of rationing. So Parliament created the NDIS to fund reasonable and necessary supports, including the early access to treatments and supports, put choice and control with the person, drive independence and social and economic participation, make access nationally consistent, portable across states, not luck. Now, in theory, it's a social insurance scheme. It's demand-driven. It's guided by views of long-term costs and built on the idea that early support can improve capacity over time. It's not means-tested. And the NDIS was never meant to replace everything. So mainstream services, health, education, housing, transport, justice, they still have duties set out in the COAG principles. So people aren't bounced between systems. Look, the bottom line is the National Disability Insurance Scheme in Australia was designed to end the rationed, block-funded system and replace it with person-centred, portable entitlements backed by early intervention and choice. Now, any reform worth having should protect that purpose. But how is the new reform risking taking us back? Happy to tell you, my friends, why this feels like pre-NDIS. The NDIS was built to end block funding and replace it with individual plans, choice, portability. But this reform points the other way. Funds shift out of individual plans and into block-funded programs picked by the government. That's the old model. So then, support was rationed by what existed. Now, families risk getting the program on offer, not the support that actually works. Then, it was a postcode lottery. Now, support depends on which state, which school, which provider can staff a program. Portability is at risk when help sits inside local block grants. So then, families had little say. Now, choice and control shrink when procurement picks the provider and you're steered into a single model. Then, waiting lists and gatekeeping. Now, if programs are full or not available, families wait and children lose momentum. Then, limited accountability. Now, outside the NDIS, review rights and quality safeguards are even murkier, and outcomes data can hide inside contracts. Then, individuality got flattened. Now, one size fits all risks pressure to mask instead of supports that affirm autistic identity. Then, families, especially disabled and single mums, carried the load as unpaid carers. Now, pushing more support outside the NDIS, and that unpaid load grows, with knock-ons for work hours, even the gender pay gap. So if reform repeats the problems the NDIS was built to fix, that isn't modernisation. The fix isn't to shrink choice and control. It's to protect them. It's to build any foundational help to the same standard. Neuro-affirming, individualised, portable, and actually available before tightening NDIS access. Oh, but I haven't even started with my concerns and criticisms yet. Strap yourself in. Let's talk about service gap risk. So supports outside the NDIS aren't fully in place everywhere. The NDIS review itself said there's not enough support outside the NDIS. If access tightens before local services exist, families fall through the cracks. The postcode lottery. So delivery relies on states and schools. Their readiness and resourcing will vary pending federal state deals. The language risk, this use of mild to moderate autism, it doesn't match NDIS rules. See, they use DSM-5 levels and functional evidence, but function decides access. So this can confuse clinicians and schools about eligibility. Talk about clarity. Support lists and criteria are still being finalised. Families need certainty. Government consultation shows major feedback and concern about what's in versus out. And the Human Rights Commission flagged worries about prescriptive lists. Talk about safeguards. So who ensures quality outside of the NDIS provider system? The NDIS Commission regulates NDIS providers, not mainstream schools or health providers. The National Disability Insurance Scheme. Autism is a disability. It's a disability under Australian law. But the NDIS doesn't grant access by diagnosis alone. It uses a function-first legal test that applies to all disabilities. See, that means autism isn't supposed to be singled out. Eligibility turns on how the disability substantially reduces functional capacity and whether supports are needed for life. Equal treatment means no diagnostic carve-outs. If an autistic person meets the test, they qualify. Full stop. Why treat autistic people differently? If supports shift outside the NDIS, they've got to be real, safe and available everywhere. And what does the actual law say? What are the rules? What do they say? Well, the Disability Discrimination Act of 1992 defines disability broadly, including neurodevelopmental conditions like autism. So yes, hello, autism is a disability in Australia. The National Disability Insurance Scheme Act, Section 24, sets out a separate test for the access to the scheme. So the impairment must be permanent, significantly reduce function in daily life, and the person is likely to need NDIS supports for life. This test applies to every condition. Every word of that encapsulates being autistic. Born autistic, die autistic. Nothing gets better. You can just have supports to help you with your capacity and quality of life. Autistic people, by the words of the NDIS's own legislation, are in every case entitled to be a part of the NDIS. And the NDIA, which is the National Disability Insurance Agency, so basically what administers the NDIS, its own guidelines make it explicit. So diagnosis doesn't equal automatic access, right? So they have to assess functional impact across the 6 domains we were talking about: communication, social interaction, learning, self-care, self-management, mobility. So if an autistic child or adult meets the legal test, they should access the NDIS. Why does this shift worry me so much? Why does it make me so upset? Okay, so the Australian government's Thriving Kids plan says $2 billion. Big money, big promises. All right, look past the headlines, my friends. It's a pivot away from individual NDIS plans towards centrally commissioned programs, including Inklings. It's a move away from individual NDIS supports into block-funded programs chosen by government, often delivered by the biggest providers in town. That means less choice and control for families. Not the therapy your child actually needs, the program that happens to be available. Remember, why the NDIS was created: to replace rationed, program-led funding with person-led portable supports. This shift risks taking us back to what the NDIS was designed to end. And when Inklings is framed as lowering autism rather than supporting autistic kids, that should absolutely horrify you. And we've seen where this goes, my friends. The one-size-fits-all, the ticker box, the be less autistic, blend in, dressed up as early support. The equity problem is obvious. Families with money will still find neuroaffirming help. Who gets hurt most? Regional families, First Nations families, culturally diverse families, families on low incomes, disabled and single mums carrying even more unpaid care. Work hours drop, bills rise. And while all of that plays out, we're told the cost problem sits with autistic people. The cost problem sits with autistic people? We were born with a medically diagnosed disability, and the cost problem sits with us? We know there's waste in the system. Not ours, though. Reassessments on repeat. Consultants on tap. Money burned fighting participants instead of supporting them. Cutting kids' tailored supports isn't reform. It's going back to the old model. The NDIS replaced block funding, central programs, and families with no say. So what can you do right now? Be heard, my friend. Raise your concerns with your federal and state members of parliament. Line up all the recent reports showing the day-to-day impact in those 6 domains listed, and use the NDIA guidance. And know your rights, regardless of NDIS, schools, workplaces, whatever. They all must make reasonable adjustments under the various disability rights legislation. Yes, my mood matches the colour of my jumper, but my intention is to simply educate you on what could be happening and how it could impact you and what you could do. If it's resonated, please be heard, my friend. Be heard.